So with 800XA, we're going to talk about cybersecurity and some of the features we have and also some of the services, and try to get, while we got these guys here, we're going to try to get through this fairly quickly so that we have some time to answer some questions, because I'm sure there's plenty out there. So anyways, let's get started. I think we wanted to start with a poll question, I think, just to try to get things flowing. My level of confidence that my system is adequately protected against internal and external threats. Just kind of give us an indication of how you feel that you are protected in that realm. Okay, we have a few there. We don't have to run this for too long. If you're hemming and hawing about it, that's all right. While people are still coming into the call, I guess, but I kind of expected to see that. I think not everyone feels totally confident that they're 100% protected, and probably that's a good thing. We always have to be on our toes. There's not too many. There's a couple. I'm afraid, very afraid. That's probably maybe a good indication as well. So, but let's continue here. Instead of the normal cybersecurity presentations, and there's plenty out there, and we do a lot from ABB as well, the first thing they will do is talk to you about all the cybersecurity happenings and the threats and the hacks that have went on to provide a pretty good base of fear factor. I think everybody's familiar with that. I think we're all pretty afraid anyways. I think we live with it in our daily lives as well as at work as well. So I think we'll bypass that, but I think we should agree on maybe the guiding principles. I guess there's no such thing as 100% absolute security. We often hear about people that are unplugged. I think we're totally safe because we're not connected to the outside world. Well, there's plenty of other threats, I think, that are out there as far as internal threats, malicious or accidental. There's also, physical threats out there as well. So there's nobody that is fully protected. The process is there. There needs to be. It's more of a process like anything else we do, like alarm management or anything. It's an ongoing kind of effort. It's not just I'm going to throw some features on here and I'm good. So that's one thing we're going to talk about is some of the different options we have, different layers, different, I guess, protection in layers. And also the balance, right? So everyone can't do everything, whether there's times and resources and money involved. It's really more of a finding the right balance about risk management. So it will not do the same thing that I think everyone else does with the fear factor. We'll just leave it at this, and hopefully we'll bring up some cases at the end if needed. So what usually we talk about from ABB is how many different layers of protection, in depth, different things you can do to make sure your system's protected. So they range from physical security all the way down to antivirus and whitelisting and other protection methods. And it has to be monitored over time, right? So it's a continuous kind of thing as well. But usually what we talk about with 800XA is a lot of system features that we have. We're going to touch on a few of those. Actually, Brett's going to show a couple of those and how they're configured. We have user authentication. We'll look at that as well maybe, or we'll at least talk about it. We have a lot of technology we put into the system, as well as even when we maybe do our installs, we're doing a lot more things automatically now, trying to protect things on the way in instead of waiting for people to configure things. There's also controller and communication card testing that we do to make sure that we're protected on that controller level, the communication cards, other things to make sure they're protected from things like firestorms and other items. And services. So, of course, we have some services to help because this is, if you think about how we used to do things, unfortunately, with when my hair was black, not gray, there wasn't a lot that we had to be concerned about. There was, we still were protected, but everything was very proprietary. So you really had to know what's going on to get into these systems. Now with commercial off-the-shelf technology, it's opened it up quite a bit. And I hear all the time that, wow, the percentage of my job that used to be process control related is a lot less now because I have to do things like cybersecurity and other items as well. So a lot of people are looking for ways to make their job easier so they can get back to what basically their job should be. With that, so one thing we can talk about, go around this diagram a little bit about the different things that we have, but since Brett and other people are here, I wanted to bring up a couple items. One thing I noticed in version 6, Brett, if we look at the right-hand side, there's automatic hardening by the system installer. So I know we did a lot of work to improve how the system's installed, but I guess that does some cybersecurity stuff on the way in as well.
Right. So like version 6.0, now the firewall is actually configured all the way through the installation. In previous versions before 6.0, it was just something you had to run after the installation was complete. It was a manual step to configure the firewall. Now with version 6.0, as you install a piece of software, it automatically configures the firewall so that there's not that condition of is the firewall configured or not configured.
I also noticed that looking down at the controller level, I know we have some added protection there. A lot of people were asking, do we have to put these third-party devices in front of our controllers and other things? But I know we do a lot with storm filters and other protection right in the controller itself.
Right. The controllers themselves, there's protection built into them to prevent a flood of packets from affecting the controllers, and also the fact that we run all of our modules with Ethernet ports through multiple rounds of testing to ensure that there's not vulnerabilities that can be impacted.
Okay. So there's quite a bit of things this is kind of a different way to look at that previous list that we had, but we're going to talk about a few of these different items here we're talking about. So let's move on and we'll look at some of these options that we have. So you might see this in some of our brochures. We try to lay it out of, okay, what options do you have available for things? So we have digital signatures, advanced access control. That's maybe where we can do some reauthentication, things like that. We have whitelisting. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Audit trail capability. We talked about the hardening already. Managing and monitoring. So then you kind of move over to services. Along with Sentinel protection, we have ways to help get these patches as easy as possible to get those into the system to make sure your system's the latest and greatest. One thing, though, is policies and guidelines consultancy. I guess, John, one thing we talked about some of the work that you do for like the maybe fingerprints and other, we'll talk about that later as well, but the policies and guidelines, I guess, instructions and things of what to do and how things are done at a site. I mean, are those usually up to snuff when you see different customer sites, or is it a range?
It's a range, but typically no. Unfortunately, you know, if the manager of the system's out of the office and you need to add a new user or make a change and no one's there to know how, you don't have that policy in front of you to make that change. It could be an emergency. So those are things that people put off to the shelf. We'll get to that later, but they can help you in certain situations.
Some customers have a whole staff, you know, and they are a larger staff and they have people taking care of this. Some people are self-maintainers and maybe a lower staff that may not be able to get to things like that. So, but I know we've helped people out before come up with those type of programs. All right, but let's continue on a little bit. For another poll question, before we get into we're going to get into a demo here pretty soon. How many people out there have tight reins on user accounts and manage those accordingly? So that means you have individual logons for every operator, or I think, Brett, you mentioned some customers, for NERC,
Right, it's not so much just about individual logins, but having the security of where the operation centers are, having the physical security. And that's their main mechanism for managing who has access to the system.
So you can still have an level operator one, but if you can prove that you can tell who was in there at the time or who got into the control room or some card key access or something like that with some kind of audit trail, that kind of covers that. So yeah. I guess that would count as well as having a pretty tight reins over who's in there. So if I go to your site and I go to log in and I see operator level 1, or will I see Fred or Roy, I guess, if it's me, I guess so.
Hopefully they don't see Roy.
No, hopefully not. That wouldn't be good for me to log into their system. All right, so we got more people than not kind of having a tight rein on there, so that's good. But let's cruise on a little bit and we can check it out. So one thing 800 is really good about, I think, is the user account management. We have options for reauthentication and double authentication. That is that advanced access control option in the system. We have very good audit trail for user actions. One thing that you said, Brett, in version 5, I believe, was that operator actions are automatically tracked in the system. But I think it's for system administration and configuration and other engineering stuff. that is part of this option, I guess, that we have in 800XA.
Right. So the operator action operator action audit trail, was available to everyone in version 5.0 and later, where in previous versions it was an extra feature.
It's right. Okay. So there's an option to get above and beyond that, but as far as tracking operator actions, that's in there from 5 and above automatically. Digital signatures, also like log over capability and inactivity for the user. I know for pharma and stuff, for 21 CFR, we needed, you could set it up with the Windows policies as well to, hey, if somebody isn't on the machine for so long, it'll automatically log out so someone can't walk up and do something to the system. All right, so I think with that, I think we wanted to go see a couple things, Brad.
Yeah, so I was going to give a example going over the log over, using a little bit of security definitions, authentication, and then going into audit trail and showing how the configurations can help us keep some security over our system. So I'm going to go present my virtual machine right now. I'll wait to make sure you guys can all see my screen. And do you see the security alert?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. There we go. There it goes, showing my screen. Okay, took a moment there for it to refresh. So what I was going to first show over was about setting up, first off, log over. So within 6.0 and later, the System Configuration Console has really taken over for being the holder of a lot of different configurations for the system. So right over here, if you launch System Configuration Console, you see a lot of options for some of the configurations, like some of the things we even did in previous sessions we did here. Well, what we're going to look at today is under security. You open it up and don't go too far into it. You'll see that you have quite a few options here for under security. The first thing we're going to look at is the configuration of audit trail. Under audit trail configuration, you'll see all the different functionalities that can be logged for the system. Now, anything that's an operator action will automatically be able to be logged no matter what licensing the system has. That was available in 5.0 and later. As you can see through here, there's a lot of different lists of items that can be logged. The most common one that we need to make sure we log is the operator actions. That would be every time an operator changes a set point or acknowledges alarm, anything along that. And you can look through here, there's a lot of other options that might be important for listing in here for it. So like audit events for security, stating if someone's trying to do something that they don't have the proper authentication for, that can also be audited. So as you can see here, I have the audit trail active by having that check mark up here, and I've picked what I want to audit. Another thing that we can do here in the System Configuration Console is also configure logover. What logover is effective for is being able to set it up so that we can have different users log in without having to actually log out of the computer. A common use for it is to have, say, a generic login that the computers automatically boot into and launch into 800XA. But that generic count is, say, read-only, so that it has no real privileges. So that way, if the operator needs to, he can restart the computer, automatically logs in, and then after it's already started up, then he logs over into a more privileged account. So that way he can control whatever he needs to control. And then if he's inactive for a certain period of time, as you can see in my example right here, after 1 hour, it would revert to a lesser user. So that would remove those permissions that the person has. So here you can see I have logover enabled, and I even have multiple logover. You might say, well, what's that? And that's just meaning that I can log over, and log over. I can just keep on logging over. So now you might say, well, I don't have System 6.0, so how can I configure this logover or audit trail? In previous versions, it was just configured over here in the admin structure under domains and the object that would relate to your system name. If you click on it, you'd see that first thing, you see an aspect called Audit Trail Config. And if you look at this window, you'll see that it looks exactly the same as what you just saw in the System Configuration Console. Instead of trying to have you remember where to navigate to, the System Configuration Console just makes it a little simpler. And then you'll notice a few aspects down as logover setting, which yet again is the same window that you just saw in the System Configuration Console. our purpose there of putting it in there is to make it so you don't have to remember, go into this structure, go under this object, and go under this object to configure it. So if you have a system previous to 6.0, these can still be configured very easily.
Or if you're old school, I guess, I mean, these still
yeah,
work today,
school,
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Or even earlier today, Roy and I were talking about it, and I said, oh, I'm going to have to go configure that there. And he's like, no, go look at the system configuration console. I think they put it in there. That was an example of, you know, just knowing where things are.
And people have had the system since version whatever, you know, they tend not to even know this is there. So it's usually a new thing for them. But it helps to gather everything in one place. Yeah.
So now that I have, say, a workplace here and I have these activated, we can see here that I'm logged in as demo O. If I right-click on it, I can change user, and I can log into a different user, so demo A, and type in my super secure password, and hit OK. And you'll see here that I will now be logged in as a new user for the workplace. Now, for Windows logged into this workplace, maybe it's a different account, but now I have the permissions of whatever demo A has. So I can come in here and go to whatever area I want to go under, and I can, you know, turn in this case, a valve to manual, and then even can turn it back to automatic, and with no problems. Now, if I open up my audit trail, we can see here first a few things that's important to see. First thing you see in the audit trail is that I logged over from demo O to demo A successfully. It'll pop up here in a moment. And then you can also see above that where I turn that valve from the manual from false to true and then back to true to false. So that's what it shows me here in the audit trail. And it's based, as you can see the user account and the node that was used to make these changes. So that's why it's useful to have those individual accounts that we talked about. And if not, at least you have the nodes to balance off on. That's a common question I get is to systems that using terminal servers for their logins and using generic accounts. Because then for this user account, it'll say the generic account, and the node will say the terminal server node. And that's one of those suggestions I really suggest, having a unique login, even if it's just per terminal server, per thin client to the terminal server.
So if, let's say you're on site and you're an operator, you might be operating in the control room, or maybe you go out to some remote station, you think they should have a separate login for that specific terminal.
Yeah.
Different account altogether, so that now you can tell the location they were at or something. Okay.
So one other thing that we can do with the security is that we can also set it up to deny or grant privileges. So one quick thing I did here was just for an area, I said for this reactor 12, once it pops up, it's already up on my screen, so I'm just waiting for it to show up on your guys' screen. As here, you can see on a reactor R12, I put a deny for the operate permissions to operate demo O. So that's just another example here of the security definitions that we were talking about earlier, where you can define on an object or in a hierarchy the ability to approve or deny permissions to specific operators. So that's what I wanted to show you guys here quickly on some of the functionality and features of security that are built into System 800XA.
Okay, we go back, but let's go back to the presentation. And Brett, I guess, what do you see on site that you've been at? I mean, how do people measure up? Is everybody doing like user access control about the same way, or is it just differ?
I find it varies different to each site, because just like as we talked about security, it needs to be the usability of the system needs to be factored into it. So some places, you know, they've really taken a hold of this and found new and unique ways of enabling security, and other ones that still stuck with the individual, the one account, but they have it so that they know who and when and where operations are occurring and using that for their.
Do you have any recommendations for people that are setting it up? I know that sometimes we get pretty involved with trying to set up the different, group of users and type of things and the different policies and so forth.
Really, the concept to have is to have a procedure on how you're doing all this, and so you're able to be maintained, just like John said earlier. Have it so that it's written methodology of how you're doing the stuff, so it's easy to maintain it and you can continue it for the years to come.
Okay. I wanted to talk about whitelisting briefly. That seems to be a no-brainer for me, but I don't know if everybody knows about it or uses it. Maybe we can, if they're not, maybe we can write to me later about why maybe you investigated it or something like that, and it wasn't for you guys. But the difference between, maybe you guys can explain, Dave, if you can give just a quick. What's the difference between antivirus blacklisting versus whitelisting?
Yeah, antivirus, they call it the blacklist because antivirus is essentially the definitions hold signatures of all of the known malware in the system. So any virus essentially that's been released that is aware of by McAfee or Symantec, they create a definition that says that signature is not allowed to run. However, there are zero-day vulnerabilities, so if I create a new piece of malware today and it's never run on anything before, the antivirus software isn't really going to know not to allow that malware to run. Whereas application whitelisting essentially builds a list of all of the known good software on a machine, so only that software is able to run. So if you whitelist an 800XA system with Windows, only the Windows software in your 800XA system is allowed to run. If I take a USB and plug it in with an executable and try to run Google Chrome or something, try to install that on the system, the whitelisting will prevent it from running, which protects against that zero-day vulnerability. So again, if I have a piece of malware that's never been released before and I try to run it on a system, a whitelisted system is going to protect it quite a bit better than a.
So we were talking earlier about it's a flu shot, right? So
yeah.
They do the best they can, but if there's a new strain or something like that, it's going to come out. So it's amply named, I guess, as far as the antivirus. The whitelisting, though, seems like a no-brainer. I was telling earlier about to my site, we were talking about Leisure Suit Larry. This was the game of choice on the PC, which had all my Allen Bradley PLC logic and so forth that was running there. And the maintenance techs would somehow come in and always find that machine, and if I wasn't watching, they would always be on it playing that game. So this would be a core, or a great place for whitelisting to keep people off of it, so these things couldn't run. So that is available for the system. I understand that can anybody comment maybe how hard is it to maintain this, I guess, or implement the whitelisting?
It's not difficult to implement it. It's about taking inventory of your system. The key point is making sure when you take inventory, it has everything you need on it and nothing more.
Correct. Yeah, you can do putting it in monitor mode essentially, where it allows everything to run. And you can view log files to see, okay, well, this executable would have been blocked because it's not a part of your whitelist, and you can easily add it to the whitelist to make sure. I'd
be afraid of a service or something that I need, like Excel or something starting up when I execute a report or something that would then start up and not be allowed to run.
Yeah, we do recommend going through a week or two at least of exercising the system while the whitelist is in monitor mode, so you can see everything that should be running, and then adding all the exceptions to that whitelist.
All right, great. All right, another poll question. I have backups of my system, 800XA, and other critical systems. I'm 100% confident that in case of a security breach, I can restore the system in a timely fashion. I guess the big thing where I work, we made some very explosive material, and we didn't take the standpoint as if we were going to have an incident. The whole thing was when we were going to have it. I think today we almost have to assume that something like this is going to happen, and especially in some facilities. So I guess that's the question I'm trying to ask is, how confident are you on your backups? Do you go and test them regularly somehow? How confident that you could get back up and running? Because I think when we see some of these incidents, these reports, a lot of the expense is their downtime in the fact that they're getting rid of the virus and getting back to some state where they can be more productive or be productive, back up and running. We got some people very confident. Looks like a good race between very confident and somewhat confident. Not many people are not very confident, which is a good thing. A little more than less as far as the somewhat confident, so that's okay. All right, well, that kind of brings us to the third part I think I wanted to try to talk about for the next few minutes is you know, how can we help, I guess. I don't want to be too sales-ish and stuff, but I did want to say that it's pretty daunting, the amount of work that we have to do in this area, and I think anywhere we can get some help would be good, whether it's, hopefully it's from us, but I'm sure there's some other people that can supply some help as well. So one thing is identifying there's a problem, I guess. And John, I know that there's benchmarks and fingerprints that we can talk about, as well as, I guess, you know, we can go all the way up to monitoring continuously some security, remotely, I guess. So maybe we can talk about some of the cybersecurity services, I guess more of the fingerprints. I know that we have tons of services available in here. Can you pick three maybe to talk about what your biggest ones are?
Yeah, we can go over just our base level cybersecurity benchmark, then fingerprint, and then our service port security monitoring channel. It's basically an evolution of how we can assess the system.
Okay. Maybe I think there's a slide, the next slide. Let's look at that really quick. The one thing for this is how far do you go, I guess, for fingerprints? I mean, it's a good, you need to do this to see kind of where your vulnerabilities are, but I guess what kind of things do you look at?
So it's a good way to, you know, a confident person in their system, they have it secure, they say they've been really good at patching and antivirus, but where are the other loopholes? Where are they vulnerable? So we have tools that will go out, scan your system. We do interviews with key site personnel, whether they're managing the system or they're in charge of the security or even operators. And we determine through the interview of their procedures and their protocols, and along with our tools, where their gaps are. And we base that off of industry standards like NERC-CIP and ISA and compliance items like that, and put the report together, give you a full analysis of each computer in the system along with some of your procedures and policies.
What do you see mostly, I guess? Is there any kind of common occurrence that you can?
Well, as we kind of mentioned earlier, procedures and policies, they're not 100% accurate, or they're dated, or they don't exist. So the quickest way to recover, say there is an incident, how do we manage that? Who's the first person to contact? Even something simple like that. Who do we call first? That happens quite a bit. A lot of unwanted software, bloatware. You know, I've seen Google Chrome on a computer before. Not Google Chrome. I'm sorry, Chromecast.
Oh.
Someone had loaded some Chromecast software on there.
Well, how are you going to watch the game? I mean,
yeah, exactly. You know, it's an important match.
To say that one late night we were trying to do that at my site, but that was, you know, here or there.
Mm-hmm.
Brett, what about networking? I mean, maybe does some of these services handle networking a little bit? Because I know that I talked to some people and they said, you know, in multiple occasions they go in to look at things and they're having some issues, and it turns out somebody's circumvented maybe some of the networking they've done. You know, they either in a virtual switch or even, and sometimes they think that maybe that's automatically done for you or something. But so the redundant networks were crossed, or this was happening,
and a lot of that is seen within our two different types of fingerprint reports, the cybersecurity and the 800XA. Allows us to see those kind of extra network configurations in the network setups that we don't expect there to be. Sometimes they are meant to be there or not, but that's what these reports help us to identify those, and then to determine how necessary they really are, or a better, more secure way of doing that.
One thing, I'm sure that I can't even keep my home PC patched up to date and that kind of thing. I'm guessing you find probably a lot of people are doing the best they can, you know?
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit, right? So the patching and antivirus are a lot of times more than a year out of date. It can be a daunting task to stay on top of that. So that's a typical item that we do find.
So one thing I wanted to say, you know, there's a lot of self-maintainers. I wanted to figure out how much work it is for these guys out there right now to keep their system up to date, I guess. I'm sure they're all Sentinel subscribers, but I think I wanted to know how much time, I often say, how much time is spent doing this versus other things, kind of stuff. So
right. So if you're trying to do it on a monthly basis, you're going to be spending 2, 3, maybe more days a week, depending on system size or how many systems you have at your site. To do that, there's a lot of things that you can do yourself to help streamline the process, and or obviously us help you out too. One solution for patching is WSUS and EPO for antivirus.
How do customers get, without those services, how do people get their patches now?
Yeah, great. And we make that readily available on My Control System. So as long as you have a My Control System account and you have the maintain package, you can get that document for Sentinel, correct. You can get all that documentation. So right now I'm logged into a demo site within My Control System. So you'd get to your system details and you have this big overview. As you can see here in the right corner or middle right, there's a cybersecurity widget, right? If you click on that cybersecurity premium, you will find all the information that is related to your 800XA system. So a quick overview of what cybersecurity is, we're kind of giving you that detail now. But more specifically, if you go into the different tabs at the top here, malware protection. So we provide the documentation of the validated DAT files. And we also give you the ability to download those approved DAT files and immediately take them over to your system. We approve those almost on a daily basis. We're typically about 24 hours behind the curve. That's so we can approve it on our system and test it. We then can hop over to third-party software, which is Microsoft. You can download the document. I've done that already. And if you've seen this document, it can get quite daunting. There's 230 pages of patches and KB articles. So this document tells you what's been qualified for System 800XA and what software system version. So, it can be a lot of work doing it that way. We do help you out a little bit here. There's a couple pre-made security patch disks that you can download and install onto your 800XA systems to help streamline that process. And then we also have some security advisories. So, for example, NotPetya and WannaCry, when that was released, we try to be as proactive as we can and give you the proper path to make corrections specifically to those vulnerabilities.
Okay. So these guys have to take this in, put it in their system, even if you consolidated them into a disk, but now they have to distribute it through the system, right, and make sure that it's dispersed or just kind of to all the nodes and so forth, and then they might have to restart these nodes and so forth.
Right.
Okay. So what is the difference now for, I guess, if you wanted to automate that a little bit?
So I think Dave will cover that. He'll be able to tell you one of the easier ways to do that through WSUS and McAfee's EPO.
So this is the way we can automate those patch updates, and that's an added service, correct? That's above and beyond the Sentinel and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is correct. If a customer wants to maintain the system themselves, they are able to install WSUS and McAfee's EPO on their own. Essentially what a WSUS is, and I have the dashboard pulled up here on my screen, it stands for Windows Server Update Service. So all of your Microsoft patches, when you click check for updates on your home PC, it goes and it talks to a Microsoft WSUS. That server houses all of the patches that Microsoft has released for your version of Windows. Now you can maintain your own copy of that server on site, so you don't have to go through My Control System, download that, I think it was 11 gigs for 800XA 5.1, that cumulative disk every month, and run it on every machine. That's a pretty manual process. The WSUS allows you to centralize that a bit more. It's completely configurable through domain policies. I have a domain controller right here. There's just a few policies that you can configure, essentially telling the entire system who to look for, or get the Windows updates from, when to update, whether I should download the updates automatically or manually, or whether the computer should automatically install those updates for me, or manually I can go and select install the updates. So it is a pretty, what are those things in the way? Here we go. It can be a very automated process, but it can also be a very manual process, and that is completely up to the customer and how they want to do it. If I'm maintaining this on my own without the security update service, when I download these updates, I specify what operating systems I have. After I get a list of all of the updates that are possible, and you can see there are 11,236 shown updates for pretty much all the versions of Microsoft that this server currently has, I would have to go through that update document that John just had up and manually go through each individual one, approving them or declining them, whether based on that document, their approval status, if it's approved for 800XA, if it's not. So that can be a very time-consuming task initially. With the security update service, what we do is we build a WSUS on-site and we connect it to a global ABB WSUS that's managed in-house and it's connected through a wrap solution. And it's a replica. So all it does is it mirrors what our global ABB server has. So anytime an update is released by Microsoft and approved by ABB, the server automatically downloads it, so the user doesn't have to do anything. The only thing the user has to do is place, over here on the left, I have a little computer groups. There are many groups based on system type, and if you have multiple systems, you can place them in various groups just for staggering and easier organization or maintenance. I have just a couple machines in here. Any machine that I put in this 800XA System 1 group will receive the patches that are specifically approved for 800XA. So if I have an Aspect server, I put it in this group, and all I have to do is when the server updates in the month, I have the domain policy saying check for updates automatically, download them automatically, and then when I log into the machine, a couple days later, I can just install the patches manually and then reboot the machine. Or again, you can have that as automated as possible. We do recommend downloading the patches automatically to the machine and then manually installing so you do have the most amount of control there. So it's very centralized. It's great also if you start adding new machines to the domain. They check into the domain and the domain controller automatically says, hey, report to this WSUS server. So it automatically knows who to get the updates from.
Dave, I got in a nasty conversation with someone about terminal, we talked about RDP nodes, and a lot of people think, oh, they're these light nodes, we don't have to, manage them as much. Oh, they're thin client, we don't have to do as much. But that's a version of Windows on there, I believe, right?
Right, all the thin clients that ABB tests and approves with the 800XA are actually a small Windows computer themselves that would still need to be updated.
Okay, so they would have to be in this list. They should be in this list and maintained accordingly.
That's correct.
Okay, because they even, I know that we don't, right out of the box at least, some customers or some industries are using zero clients, but even those have updates and stuff, but that wouldn't be covered under the Windows updates, right? So, okay. So there's more management to do with these smaller boxes, I think, is the question. Okay.
Yeah, the WSUS has a dashboard that you can easily log in and see the status of all of your computers. So if you're doing this manually on a month-to-month basis, or maybe you accidentally skip a month because you were really busy, you may not know what patches are missing. The WSUS will tell you what patches are required for each individual machine, which ones are missing, and then it's much easier to install them. And from an antivirus standpoint, there's also the McAfee ePolicy Orchestrator. For antivirus, ABB does support both McAfee's EPO and Symantec's centralized antivirus as well. There are many antivirus solutions out there. We just picked the two most prevalent in the industry and support those. The advantage of using the EPO, again, is centralized antivirus management from one machine. I can deploy my VirusScan Enterprise and my antivirus definition updates from one machine instead of having to go to each individual machine doing all of the installation, policy configuration. and DAT file updates. With the security update service, this server can update automatically daily with the latest approved update from the ABB server. Or you can go manually to My Control System every day and download the latest one, or as often as you'd like.
Yeah. I was going to say every day that's updated almost, right? Or every other day. So it seems a little crazy, right? That you have to, I mean, every other day probably look for new files there.
Yeah, this does everything for you.
Okay. All right. Very good. No, so I think we just have one more topic, I think, before we get to some questions. Yeah, please put your questions in the Q&A box there and we'll get to it. The one thing is about, the poll question was on disaster recovery, or, you know, making sure your backups are okay. And so maybe I think I asked John for some tips and tricks, I guess, or some tips for people out there making backups and things they can do to make sure they work correctly.
Right. So first of all, just take routine backups, whether you're doing it through a centralized server or if you're manually going to each computer. Make sure you have a process in place where you're doing it on a regular basis, you know, monthly, quarterly, at some instance, not yearly, or by, you know, having long durations between backups. The next would be to verify the integrity of the backup. So the software does tell you that it's good, but it doesn't mean it's always good. So you want to go in and maybe spin it up in a virtual environment just to make sure that Windows boots properly and all the services initiate. Ideally, put it on some bare metal, a replica server, and install that image there. And then the next thing would be to have it stored in multiple locations. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a site where the backup is on the D partition and it's a single drive. It's not an actual separate hard drive. It's a large storage or a large drive that's just been partitioned. So you want to take that image off, store it in a separate location away from maybe your centralized server as well.
Okay.
A fireproof safe would probably be a good idea too, maybe off-site even.
Yeah, I think we did that in my plant. We actually made copies and put them off-site. We also had to do incremental backups. I mean, we did like a grandfather kind of scheme. Right. But I guess that's if you're doing incremental backups in between your full backups and things. But now how does that change with VMware and stuff? I mean,
well, we still normally use other products because just VMware itself isn't a backup solution, but, you know, using Acronis and also
Quest, Rapid Recovery.
Yeah, it gives you the option for that grandfather, father-son type backup. Okay. But that's meant to just do small incrementals, but still at that intervals, we still suggest, you know, full backups at a certain period of time.
Right. Right, and then documents and procedures, again, you've heard me say this a few times now. If you're managing the system and you're on vacation, out of the country, something, you know, make sure that your team is able to recover a node if it just has a simple hard drive failure. You want to be back online as quickly as possible. So having those procedures and documents in place will help your team recover quickly.
And what I mean, you said we can do continuous security monitoring. Do we do anything to help with backups, I guess, or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. If, you know, you don't have the resources to test the images or to, you know, even write the documents, we can go through and help you put that together.
Okay. You know, back to the online monitoring, I guess. One thing is we're talking about remote access, right, all the time, and yet we're talking about cybersecurity, and does that conflict, or how are users accepting the fact that, hey, if you do need help, we can remote in? I mean, from day one, we always had some way to remote into a system, whether it be, hey, plug in the cable now, which sometimes we're still doing that in some cases, right, for remote access.
We have hundreds of remote connections across the country and around the world, thousands, through customer-provided VPNs and our solution, remote access platform. As long as it's up to industry standards, which, you know, is very important, secure remote access is a normal thing these days.
Acceptance is there, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right, so I think we wanted to get to some Q&A, some questions and things. If there's something we didn't cover and you wanted to talk about it or see something, or we got the guys here. So I think we have a few here. I see one. I've seen products that assist in managing user accounts and passwords. Does ABB supply a solution for this?
I really don't know. I'd have to look into that. I don't know. Do you guys know of any solutions that you've heard of for managing the Windows accounts?
No, not at the moment.
So, Vern, we'll have to get back to you on that one. Well, I have to ask some people.
Okay, the next one says, some of the cybersecurity incidents that we have seen lately are malware infections introduced by software with proper certificates and hidden in legitimate applications. How can this malware be detected?
And that goes exactly what David was showing earlier about whitelisting. Even if they do have a proper certificate, the certificate's just saying that this is the manufacturer of this piece of software. But the way the whitelisting works is it actually generates its own certificate based on the file size and the information in that file. So whitelisting itself would prevent the execution of a piece of software, even if it has a manufacturer's cert saying, I was built by company XYZ. So whitelisting, that's where one of those great protections of whitelisting.
Yeah, anytime a file changes, its signature changes, essentially its hash value that basically tells what that is.
Okay.
So whitelisting keeps a list of all the actual signatures. I mean, whether it's explorer.exe, if I replace that process, the new one won't be able to run because it's not the same signature as the old one.
Right. It wouldn't be the same file size, so the hash would change. Right. Or it wouldn't be the exact same bits within it.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I'm sold on whitelisting. How about, do you support, HA, I'm going to guess, is high availability in VMware?
Yes, we do support high availability in VMware, but high availability shouldn't be also make sure it's not thought of as a backup solution. You know, as high availability does have some great functionality that's good for 800XA for saying that if this piece of hardware dies, this VM will restart in a new piece of hardware, which is what the functionality of high availability is, but it shouldn't also be a replacement for backups.
Okay. All right. Does thin client, or do thin clients need to install antivirus software?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
100% yes.
Oh, Brett giggled during that one.
Yeah. No, we definitely want to make sure thin clients have antivirus software, because that could be a vulnerability in the system that could be leveraged by somebody for nefarious purposes.
What was that word?
Nefarious.
Nefarious?
Yeah.
All right, this is also a English lesson for your robotics. All right, I don't see any more questions.
No more questions?
I expect everyone to call to get whitelisting and some services, I guess. I mean, I don't know if anybody on the side, if you've investigated things like whitelisting or something like that, write me and let me know why it wasn't for you or something. Just for my knowledge, because after what I've heard today, I'm ready to go. So I would definitely push that a little more probably. With that, I guess we're okay.